Okay, so compound interest can either be your friend or your foe. Okay? If you're borrowing money, it's your foe. You know, so if you're borrowing money and you're getting charged a, let's say, 7% interest rate, you might actually be getting charged a little bit more than that, depending on how often they calculate the interest that you owe. And that's called compounding. So quite often for things like credit cards, they'll advertise a percentage rate, and then in the small print you'll find out that it's actually higher. So I think a standard credit card is like 19.99%, but if you read in the small print, it'll talk about the effective annual rate, and it'll actually be a little higher. And that's because of compounding. Compounding just means how calculating interest, okay? Now, if you're investing money, let's say you have a good job and you take a bit of the money that you make, put it into some kind of a savings or RSP, something that can grow over time. Does everybody know what an RSP is? Sort of?
Registered retirement savings fund?
Yeah, it's actually a pretty good deal. It's really only useful if you're making money, you have a decent job. What it is, it's a way of the government rewarding you for investing money in yourself. And the idea is that later on, when you're too old to work, okay, that you use some of that money to help live off of. And that way you're less likely to sort of ask the government for help. So they try to help you while you're working so that they don't have to help you later. And what they allow you to do is, we're just talking about RSPs, cool. Is instead of paying as much tax, they allow you to like invest in your own RRSP, and then you pay less tax. You get a tax break. So it's almost like they're lending you a bit of money to be able to buy them. And then later on, when you're a lot older and you start to draw out the money, then you get taxed on it then. And the idea is you'll get taxed at a lower rate than when you're working. It's kind of a good deal, but it really only makes a lot of sense if you're making a decent wage. So when you're in your career that you're choosing to do. But in that case, compound interest can help you, because your money will, the idea is your money earns interest, okay? So let's say that you have $1,000. And let's say you put $1,000 into some kind of an investment, the bank, whatever, okay? And at the end of the year, they give you 10%. So 10% of 1,000 is $100. So you put away $1,000 for a year, and at the end of the year, they give you, 10 cents. So they give you $100. So you made yourself $100 for doing nothing. Okay? So how much money do you have now? Total. You had your $1,000 you put in, plus the $100 interest. So now you have $1,100, right? Now, if you leave the money there, what happens at the end of next year? They give you another 10%. Is that $100 again? So you get another $100 at the end of the next year? No, you'd get a little more. Because you started the next year with $1,100. So at the end of that year, they're going to give you 10% of that, which is another $110. So you actually made a little bit more. And that idea of interest on top of interest is kind of the whole idea of compounding. We say it compounds itself. It's kind of like a small snowball at the top of a hill, and you roll it, and what happens? It starts to get towards the bottom.
It's bigger.
It gets bigger. It grows. So when you see commercials about like money stuff, investments, and they talk about your money growing, it kind of, with compound interest, it kind of does. Because you earn interest on interest. So you earn some money on top, and then that money starts to earn money. Does that make sense? That's what we call compounding. And the more often that the banks or financial institutions calculate how much you've earned, the faster it grows. So compounding is good for you if you're investing. Not so good for you if you owe money, okay, because you're actually paying higher amounts. Okay, so let's just take it. This section is interesting because visually it's the hardest thing in this unit, but in reality, students tend to do really well on these questions once you get the hang of it. This is the compound interest formula. I know it looks kind of crazy. A stands for like what the money is worth later, the final amount. Okay? So if you invested $1,000 for 20 years and you wanted to find out how much it's going to be worth after 20 years, that's what the A stands for. The P we've seen before. What does P stand for?
Principal.
Principal, yeah. You can think of that as your starting amount. So if you invested $1,000, that's where you put it, where the P is. Then you have a bracket thing, 1 plus R we've seen before. Do you remember what the R was?
Rate of interest.
Yeah, rate of interest or interest rate. Okay. And that always has to be a decimal. If it's 7%, what's that as a decimal?
0.07.
0.07, yeah. 10%, 0.10, etc. Now, N is interesting. N has to do with how often they calculate the interest. So if it's monthly, N would be 12. If it's weekly, N would be 52. What if it was daily? What would N be? How many days in a year?
365.
365. So they'll give you that time period that refers to N. Then up here, this is an exponent, and T we've seen before. T is just how many years. If it's 1 year, you just put 1. If it's 2 years, you put 2. 10 years, put 10, etc. When you're using your calculator, it's probably helpful to put a bracket around these as well, like that. So you'll get the hang of it pretty fast when we do some questions, even though it looks kind of, when you first look at whenever you look at a math formula, your brain goes, I don't know what that is, you know. But once you do it, it's not too bad. So let's go try a problem. Maybe. Okay, example 1. Your invests $3,775 in a financial institution at 4.75% compounded annually. What does the word annually mean?
Yearly.
Yeah, it's another way of saying yearly. Annual is a year. So basically, the starting amount was my P, so I'm going to say my principal is $3,775. My interest rate, it said 4.75%. What's that as a decimal? What am I going to use as a decimal? How do I turn that into a decimal?
Is 0.0475.
Yeah, it's 0.0475. And the way I do that is I just take that number and divide by 100. And that'll turn it into the decimal for me. And it's compounded annually. So N is 1. It's just once a year. And it says, what's it worth after 2 years? So T would be 2. Okay? So then, looking at this formula here, I'm just going to write it out. P will be 3,775. Then it's 1 plus my R, which is 0.0475, over 1 to the exponent of N, which is 1 multiplied by 2. And you just have to be really careful when you punch this in. Once you've done it a bunch of times, it's not hard. So here's how I'd punch it in. 3,775 times, if it's beside the bracket, it means times. And I'm going to open the bracket, and I'm going to go 1 plus 0.0475. I don't really need to divide by 1, but just because I want to do it the same way every time, I'll punch it in. Divide by 1, close the bracket, and then I need to get to the exponent. Now, by now on your calculator, you should know which button that is, right? For some of you, it might be like a little roof symbol. On this one, it looks like it's the y to the x. Yours might be the other way around. It might say x to the y. Those are all exponent keys. So I'm going to hit the exponent key. Notice that it gives me the roof symbol when I do that. Then I'm going to open the bracket. I'm going to go 1 times 2. And then I'm done. Then I hit equals, and I get $4,142.14. If I round that off, cut it off there. Okay. So the money has grown, right? It sat there and now it's worth more. We talked about this before. Why do banks give you money for giving them money? So if you put money in the bank into some kind of an investment, they pay you for that. How do they pay you? What do they do with the money? Yeah, but so they're giving you interest, right? But what do they do with, you put your money into the bank. So how do they make money off that? They lend it to people, yes. And that's where they make their real money, right? So if you had $100,000 and you invested it into the bank, maybe the bank gives you 5%. Then the bank will take that $100,000 and they'll lend it to other people that are taking out loans, let's say to buy a house or something. And they'll charge them interest. And they'll make sure they charge them more than what they're paying you. That way they make profit, right? Does that make sense? Yeah, so it's like they don't have their own money. They just take your money and lend it out. And there's also more people borrowing than putting money away. So it's an interesting, they kind of act like, have you ever heard the term the middleman? They're kind of like the middleman. Right? Okay. Example 2. Liliana invests $4,000. So in my calculator, that'd be my principal. So I'd go 4,000 times 1 plus. And the interest rate this time is 5.5%. So that's 0.055 divided by my compounding periods, which is daily. How many days in a year? I'm going to put 365. Yeah, divided by 365. Close the bracket, exponent. Then I use that same number, whatever number I just used before I close the bracket, I use it again every time. 365 times how many years? It said after 3 years. So t equals 3. So I'm going to put 3 here. Close the bracket. Done. If I hit equals, I get $4,717.51. So in the key in your booklet here, that there should have been 0.51 there. I'm not sure why it's missing. And if it says how much interest did she earn, well, you could just subtract the original amount from that. So if I took my 4717.5 and I subtracted what I started with, which was 4,000, that's how much money she made on her investment. She made $717.51. Okay. Now, just for interest's sake, quite often things like RSPs, people will pay, like they'll have a little bit of money taken off each check to go in there automatically. And you can do that through like your payroll departments or wherever you're working. So the money grows a lot faster. These questions, it's just one amount of money that sits there and grows. So it doesn't grow that much, but if you were putting $100 away every month, then it would grow a lot more, right? because you'd be putting 100 plus the 100 interest, plus the money was already there. It tends to just grow over time. And it can be quite significant. Even putting away, let's say, $50 a month or something, right? I should probably show you what that looks like. It's kind of cool, actually. You'll spend a bit of time doing this. So I'm going to pause this live thing.